Well, I guess I could be described as sort of a foodie. I guess some of my friends would say that. I love going to fancy places in New York. Not because I'm fancy, but because you only get one chance in life to try these things. So you should go try them instead of waiting for it, and coming back to it later on in life. So I love trying new things in New York. I think that's one of the reasons, even for some of the features you see in Foursquare, and for the reason for even building Foursquare. We wanted to be exposed to new things that our friends knew that we didn't know, especially in a very dynamic city like New York, where we grew up. There could be something around the corner, a couple of days after you notice that nothing was there, and you just want to be reminded of these things. You want it to have something in your pocket that tells you to go about exploring this. So I love that. Before Foursquare, I used to a lot of different things. As I was finishing college, as I was finishing grad school, I got a chance to work with this startup that was working in the mobile space, and they were trying to bring music to mobile phones. So this was back around 2001 or 2002. They were friends of mine, so I was consulting and helping them out. And then the company got acquired by Sony Music, and I ended up working at Sony Music for about 3.5 years. And I helped them build all of their mobile tools, mobile backend, mobile music store. This was before iTunes existed, so we were like going into uncharted territory. So it gave me a good exposure into how do you sell content online, how do you sell music online, what does it mean to have digital content, how do you distribute that, how do you actually distribute content on a whole bunch of different mobile phones. So this was before iPhone, Android, and you had your standard platforms. So you had to every time you got an app out, you had to test on various platforms, and so I got a chance to see the entire ecosystem. I think that app in the old days really taught me a lot about designing for the small screen, designing for almost bundling your application, bundling whatever software you wanted, bundling your experience and shipping it off. Essentially, that's how mobile apps work. Taught me a lot about API development, and building for consumers, building for users in the end. That potentially you never really see or talk to. I think these days it's probably a lot about usability and an ease in which you can get to the content that you want, because I think users have come to understand that you have many different apps and many different functions on your phone, but you know sort of what you want. So you want to find a restaurant, you go to a specific app or one or two apps to go find it. You want to call someone, you go to the phone app. You want to text someone, you go to the SMS app. So all of these apps that you have on your phone have a specific function. I think that's something to think about. Your app has to have a primary use case that brings people back in. I think simplicity has a lot to do with it. I think simplicity is probably high on that list, because you want to design a very beautiful experience that, again, accomplishes that goal of getting the user in, giving them information that they want, and getting them out. And I think probably the third one I would mention is probably reminders to use the app. So notifications, alerts, something very powerful that actually brings you back into the app, that tells you something timely, either about your friends or where you are, and what you're doing. In terms of audience, I think the number one thing you notice, web versus mobile, is that the way you release updates and the way you release your experience of the app is totally different. Because in the mobile world, you have to work very much against a release schedule or a timeline. Because you have to build the app, you have to send it to the app store or the company that's going to distribute it, wait a couple of weeks, and then it goes live. So it's unlike the web. On the web, if you notice something that you want to be changed, either a bug or a new feature or something that the user asks for, you just fix it. 2 minutes later, it's live for everyone in the world. So that's probably the number one fundamental difference in the way you actually release software. And the other thing about the mobile audience is that, again, it goes back to one of the rules, which is this idea of give them exactly what they want. They come into the app, they find it, they leave the app. You have to kind of fit that pattern of ease in which you can actually find the thing that you want. Whereas on the web, you have a much different interface. It's not a tiny small screen. You can have a search box on the same page as you show detailed content. You can you have access to a full keyboard. The browsing experience is much faster. You're not constrained by 3G speeds or edge speeds or something like that. So the way you design, you have a lot more flexibility and freedom in the way you design for the web. You're allowed to make a few mistakes and trial and error and just get stuff out there and see what works. On the mobile, you still have that same habit, but it's not as easy to actually A/B test. It's not actually easy to see how the audience is responding. So that's probably the biggest thing that you keep in mind. Life now, 2.5 years later after we started the company, is completely different. So we're now at more than 10 million users. We're we just announced a couple of days ago that we crossed 1 billion check-ins, so 1 billion unique data points from all around the world. We have a staff of about 85 employees at Foursquare, both here in San Francisco as well as back in New York in the headquarters. And I think these days in the early days, I feel like I was doing everything. Dennis and I started the company. For the first year, it was just us. So we were doing everything from coding to the design to thinking about the product, to marketing or press or any of that stuff, to writing copy on the website, to fielding customer service and like bug reports and all this stuff with the users. And now that we're much bigger, there are a lot more things to do. We're working on a lot more things. We've had to step up into more management roles, obviously. We've had to think a lot more about building the team. That's probably the number one thing that takes up our time, is just thinking about how do we get better people to come on board? How do we make sure they can work well with each other? What are the things that we can give them to make for a great workplace? And how do we actually go create the next generation of products, the next iteration of all of this stuff? So our time has gone from kind of chopping up between many different tasks into one or two really, really big important things. And we each own one or two really big important things. So for a long time, I think the story of Foursquare has been a story in many different pieces. I think early on when we first launched it, it was this idea, it has game mechanics, it's about the act of checking in, sharing interesting tips and recommendations with your friends. And I think now we tell that story in a much better way. We have a lot more tools and a lot more kind of more fleshed out features that actually explain and kind of handhold you through this experience. You check in to tell your friends where you are. You check in so that you can remind yourself, you can have this diary of all the places you've ever been. But then, in checking in and doing all this stuff, you also get this idea of making your recommendations better. So when you tap the Explore tab in the app, the more data it knows about you and the more places it knows about that you like, the better it can recommend better things for you to go do in the city. So check-ins are actually adding value. That's completing that circle of, I'm incented with rewards like deals at various places. I'm incented to actually go check in with the game mechanics. I'm incented by the leaderboard and the mirror and all these fun things in there. So I actually go perform the action. I actually go share my check-in or my tip and all these other things. And they actually come back and reward me because they lead to better deals. They lead to better recommendations. And it closes that circle. Over the summer, we've released a whole suite of features, just one after another. You've probably been noticing news cycles. And the idea in each one of those releases has been to make the experience much tighter, much easier to use, much richer, to engage you in a better way. So, starting with something powerful and as simple as just notifications at the beginning of the summer. So notifications allowed you to see what people were talking about, see what people were acting on, and when they were doing your tip or when they were leaving comments in your check-in. So this allowed you to come back into the conversation and gave this other kind of almost news feed to keep you coming back, this activity feed that reminded you of what's going on. We took all the data points, now we have more than 1 billion check-ins, and we put it back into the system called Explore. And Explore are basically recommendations. So it uses the data on where you've been, where you've checked in, uses data on where your friends go, uses data on where the general population, your neighbors actually in the city go, and it tells you, you're looking for an Italian place, why don't you try this new place around the corner? It leads you to the new experiences, which again is which has always been one of our goals. And then recently we launched, a couple of days ago, the idea of lists on mobile. We launched lists on web about a month ago. And lists are basically collections of tips. So instead of just leaving individual tips at various venues all around the world, the idea here is that you would curate a few of them and you would say, here are the 10 best places that I love about Tokyo. And this is something Dennis and I thought about, and we put into the original version of the product, but we took it out just before launch. And the idea is, we have a to-do list of things that we want to go to, but out of those things that are in the to-do list or out of the tips that we leave in the city or out of the places we go to, there are other things, there are collections of the things that we want to actually share with our friends. So why don't we make that easier? And that's the idea of tip lists. So each one of these features, the idea has been all about, how do we get people to come back into the app? How do we engage them and give them something more valuable? And how do we make all those data points actually useful for everyone? We are on all the major platforms. So we are on iPhone, which we started with, BlackBerry, which came around about 8 months after we launched, Android, which originally started out as a product in the community, and then we took over and started contributing more to it. And we're also in a couple of open source kind of efforts like the Palm app and Windows Mobile and things like that. And iPhone, above and beyond, continues to be the biggest platform. And BlackBerry and Android are kind of tussling it out for second place, although Android is gaining ground. So yeah, partly it's because We launched with iPhone. They still remain dominant, but iPhone is just a good kind of experience in terms of, they launched first to market. We were first on them. A lot of people carry them around, and it's just a very rich experience to use. We do think about HTML5 every now and then. There are a couple of elements in the app that are sort of dynamically loaded HTML5 views, I guess you could say. And the reason for that is, a lot of that stuff iterates very quickly, and it's easier to actually get it out in HTML5 form than in app form. So there's always this debate. Sometimes I tend to favor HTML5, but sometimes I really like the feel and the performance of the native application. So the majority of the app is in native mode.